Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today with a little mental experiment.
Okay, I'm ready.
I want you to imagine you are in a car. You're driving down a highway somewhere in the Pacific Northwest.
Where?
Maybe it's Highway 101, you're looping around the Olympic Peninsula, or maybe you're cutting east through the Cascades on I-90. You look out the window, and what do you see?
Trees. Just a wall of trees, lots of green.
Right, a wall of green. You see the massive Douglas firs, the hemlocks, maybe a cedar here and there if you're really paying attention. Your brain just registers forest.
Mm-hmm.
It's majestic, absolutely. But it's kind of uniform, isn't it? It becomes a texture more than a collection of individual things.
Scientists actually have a term for that. It's a cognitive processing thing. We filter out the details to process the landscape quickly.
What do they call it?
We see the green blur.
The green blur. It sounds like a comic book villain or something.
It does, doesn't it? But it's really just our brains being efficient. We're wired to focus on the big stuff, the charismatic megaflora, if you will. The big trees, the things that could fall on us.
The things that matter for immediate survival. But today, our mission is to metaphorically stop the car,
Okay.
get out, and walk right up to that wall of green until our noses are practically touching the bark.
Yeah.
Because when you break past that blur, when you really zoom in, you realize that the trees, they're just the scaffolding.
That's a great way to put it. The trees are the architecture, but the real chemical engines, the nutrient recyclers, the water sponges, are actually the things growing on the trees and in the soil beneath them.
And that's what we're doing. We're zooming in on these microforests. We're taking a virtual road trip across Oregon and Washington. We're going from the soaking wet, old-growth rainforests of the coast all the way to the arid high deserts on the east side.
It's a journey of extremes.
It is. And we are looking specifically at two groups of organisms that most people, myself included, completely overlook: lichens and truffles.
And what's so fascinating here and what the research we're looking at today points to is that these aren't just decorations.
Right.
I think a lot of people see moss or lichen on a branch and think, oh, that's just some garnish on the tree.
Yeah, forest fluff.
Forest fluff, exactly. But the science is showing that these organisms are actually the engines running the entire ecosystem. They are fundamental.
So before we, pack our virtual bags and head to the rainforest, we need to do some heavy lifting on definitions. Because I feel like everyone knows the word lichen. But if I put a gun to your head and asked you to explain what it is biologically,
Would get a lot of blank stares.
I think I'd struggle. My gut instinct, my first guess would be, it's a plant. It's like moss.
And you would be wrong on both counts. And you shouldn't feel bad about that because even early botanists struggled with this for centuries. A lichen is not a plant. In fact, it kind of disrupts our whole concept of what an individual organism even is.
This is where we get into that composite organism idea.
Exactly. A lichen isn't one thing. It is a symbiotic partnership between at least two completely different kingdoms of life. It's a fungus and an alga, or sometimes a cyanobacteria, living together in a single unified body.
The source material we have uses this analogy that I think is just brilliant. The house and the cook.
I like that one.
Let's unpack that. Who is building the house?
The fungus is the architect. It builds the phallus, which is the visible body of the lichen. It creates the structure, the outer skin, we call that the cortex, and it anchors the whole thing to the tree or the rock or the soil.
So it's providing the physical structure.
It provides the protection from UV radiation, it holds onto water, and it creates this very controlled, stable microenvironment inside.
So the fungus is the landlord. It provides the real estate and the security system.
Right. But fungi, you have to remember, are heterotrophs. They can't make their own food from sunlight like plants can. They need to eat something.
They need a tenant.
They need a tenant who can cook. And that's where the alga comes in. The alga moves into the house. It lives inside the woven fungal threads. And because algae can photosynthesize, they take sunlight, water, and CO2, and they turn it into sugars. They are the cook.
So the fungus provides the roof, and the alga pays rent in carbohydrates.
That's the classic view. It sounds like a happy cooperative marriage, doesn't it?
It does. It sounds very harmonious.
But if you dig into the deeper mycological literature, some scientists describe it in a slightly different way.
Oh.
Some call it controlled parasitism.
Controlled parasitism. Okay, that sounds a lot less romantic.
Well, think about it. The fungus is definitely the dominant partner in this relationship. In many cases, the fungus actually penetrates the algal cells with these little specialized structures called hostoria to, siphon off the sugar more efficiently.
So it's less like paying rent and more like a direct tap into the kitchen.
A direct tap. The fungus creates a stable, safe environment for the algae, sure, but the algae effectively can't reproduce sexually while it's locked inside the lichen. It's a kind of benevolent captivity.
That is a surprisingly dark twist for something I see growing on a park bench. But this partnership, whether we call it a marriage or a hostage situation, is unbelievably successful.
It's one of the most successful survival strategies in nature. Because of this partnership, they can live almost anywhere. You find them on tree bark, on bare rock in the alpine, on soil, on old cars, on glass.
Wow.
They are found in every single terrestrial ecosystem on Earth.
And they can survive just incredible extremes, right?
Oh, absolutely. They can survive being dried out to a complete crisp, becoming totally dormant, and then resurrect within minutes the moment it rains. They are masters of endurance.
Okay, so keeping that partnership in mind, the landlord and the captive cook, let's start our road trip.
Let's do it.
We are on the wet side of the Pacific Northwest. We're imagining the Hoh rainforest in Washington, or the old-growth Douglas fir stands in the Oregon Cascades.
So it's cool, it's misty, and everything is dripping. The air feels thick with moisture.
But we're looking for a giant, not a giant tree, but a giant lichen. We're looking for Lobaria or oregana.
Also known as the lettuce lichen, or sometimes Oregon lungwort. And that name, lettuce lichen, is incredibly accurate.
Paint the picture for us. If I'm standing at the base of a 200-foot Douglas fir, what am I looking for? Can I even see it from the ground?
You might see pieces of it scattered on the forest floor, especially after a storm, but to see it in its glory, you really need to look way, way up. It grows high in the canopy. It's what we call a foliose lichen.
Foliose meaning leafy.
Exactly. Foliage-like. It has these large, loose lobes that look almost exactly like big heads of loose-leaf lettuce hanging from the branches. It just drapes over them.
And the color, is it a deep green?
It's this very vivid, almost yellowish green on the upper surface when it's wet, and underneath it's a pale brown and kind of fuzzy with fine hairs. It's ruffled. It has a lot of texture. You can see why it gets the name.
But this isn't something I'm going to find in just any forest, right? Like if I go to a tree farm where all the trees are 40 or 50 years old, will I see Lobaria oregana?
Almost certainly not. This species is. It's extremely picky. It is an old growth specialist.
What makes it so picky?
It has very specific temperature and humidity requirements. The research shows it doesn't like temperatures over about 15 degrees Celsius.
Which is, what, in Fahrenheit?
About 59 degrees Fahrenheit. So it really, really likes it cool.
Wow. So a hot summer day in a young, open forest would just cook it.
It would stress it out immensely. It loves the cool, damp, stable microclimate that you only find deep inside an ancient forest. Plus, it grows very slowly.
How slowly?
The growth rate is about 30% of its total size per year, so it needs a stable platform, an old branch on an old tree that isn't going to be cut down in a few decades. It needs centuries to really establish and build up its population.
And when it does establish itself, the scale is. It's the part of the reading that I had to double check because it just seemed impossible.
You're talking about the biomass, I assume?
The biomass, yes. We look at a giant Douglas fir and we think all the green stuff is the needles. But the notes say that in these old-growth forests, Lobaria oregana can make up 5% of the total weight of the foliage on that tree.
It's a massive amount. We are not talking about a light dusting on the branches. We are talking about 10 to 15 kilograms of this stuff.
That's, what, 22 to 33 pounds of just this one lichen on a single tree?
It's like hanging a heavy mountain bike in the upper branches of every single old tree in the forest. And what's more, its biomass is often greater than all other epiphyte species combined.
So it's the dominant life form in the canopy, besides the tree itself.
Absolutely. And that 30 pounds, that's just the dry weight. You have to remember, we are in the rainforest.
Right. It's a sponge.
It's a super sponge. Lichens are poikilohydric, which is a fancy way of saying they have no way to regulate their water content. They just equilibrate with the humidity in the air. And Lobaria can hold 2.7 grams of water for every single gram of its dry weight.
So when it rains, that 30 pounds of dry lichen turns into, what, almost 90, 100 pounds?
Easily. It's swelled up. If you calculate that out over a whole forest, a single hectare might be holding 2 metric tons of wet lichen hanging over your head.
That's a hidden rain, a reservoir in the sky.
It completely changes the hydrology of the forest, intercepts the rain, holds it, and releases it slowly through evaporation, which in turn keeps the humidity of the entire forest higher for longer.
But here is the question that I keep coming back to. Why does the tree put up with it? If I'm a Douglas fir and I have this heavy, wet blanket clinging to all my branches, it's blocking some of my light, it's adding all this weight that could break my limbs in a windstorm, Why don't I evolve some way to shed it, to get it off me?
That is the million-dollar question. And the answer lies in chemistry. Specifically, it lies in the nitrogen cycle.
Okay, let's unpack this, because nitrogen is one of those things we hear about in gardening, but the actual mechanics can be a bit tricky.
For sure. So nitrogen is absolutely essential for all life. It's a key building block of DNA, RNA, proteins, and the air we're breathing right now is 78% nitrogen gas.
So it's everywhere.
It's everywhere. But, and this is a huge, but that atmospheric nitrogen, N2, is locked together with an incredibly strong triple bond. It is one of the strongest chemical bonds in nature. It's almost inert.
Meaning trees can't use it?
Trees, grasses, most plants, they can't break that bond. They are literally swimming in an ocean of nitrogen, but are often starving for it.
It's the classic water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink.
That's the perfect analogy, but Lobaria has a secret weapon. Remember how we said the photosynthetic partner is usually an alga?
Yes.
Well, Lobaria actually has a three-way partnership. It has the fungus, it has a green alga for its main photosynthesis, and it has little internal pockets that house a cyanobacteria.
And cyanobacteria, they're special.
They are nitrogen-fixing machines. They are one of the few groups of organisms on Earth that produce the enzyme needed to break that triple bond in atmospheric nitrogen.
So the cyanobacteria inside the lichen can break that bond.
Yes, they take nitrogen gas right out of the air and convert it into ammonium, which is a form of nitrogen that plants can use. It's biologically available.
So the lichen is literally pulling fertilizer out of thin air.
It is a fertilizer factory hanging in the canopy of the forest. And for a long time, scientists thought, okay, that's great, but how does the tree get that fertilizer? They assumed the lichen had to fall to the forest floor, what we call litter fall, and then decompose into the soil for the tree's roots to take it up.
Which seems inefficient. That could take a long time.
It would. It's a very slow process. But then researchers did something incredible. They climbed up into the canopy of these old-growth firs, right up into the branches.
100, 200 feet up.
Yep. And they carefully peeled back the thick, wet mats of Lobaria. And they found that the trees had grown what are called adventitious roots.
Roots? You mean roots growing out of the branches? High up in the air?
Yes. The tree was growing roots directly from its limbs, but not out into the air. It was growing them into the wet, decomposing underlayer of the lichen mats themselves.
That is wild. The tree isn't waiting for the fertilizer to fall to the ground. It's plugging itself directly into the source.
It's essentially farming the lichen that's growing on its own branches. It's bypassing the soil entirely. And when you look at the numbers, you see why. Along with another related species, Lobaria pulmonaria, this lettuce lichen accounts for about 56% of the total new nitrogen input in these old-growth forests.
56%. Over half the new fertilizer entering the entire system is coming from these things hanging in the trees.
It completely reframes how we see the forest, doesn't it? The giant, ancient trees are critically dependent on these symbiotic, microscopic partners living on their bark.
It's not garnish, it's a life support system.
That's it, exactly. And it's not just for the trees. When that lichen does eventually fall to the ground during a windstorm, for example, it becomes a critical food source for other animals.
Right, the food web connection. Who is down there eating this fallen lettuce?
Deer, elk, mountain goats, even some smaller mammals. You have to imagine what winter is like in the Cascades or the Olympics. The snow can be feet deep, the green grass is all buried, the deciduous bushes have lost all their leaves. It's a starving time for herbivores.
They're running out of food.
But then a big winter storm blows through. It knocks down a bunch of branches, and with them, huge clumps of Lobaria. And that lichen is rich in protein because of all that nitrogen fixation. It's a vital, high-quality survival food that gets them through the lean months.
So if you remove the old-growth forest, you lose the lichen. If you lose the lichen, you lose the nitrogen fertilizer for the next generation of trees, and you lose the winter food supply for the deer and the elk.
It's a cascade. It's a perfect example of how removing one seemingly small piece can unravel the whole system. Everything is connected.
Okay, so that's the wet side. It's a world of giants, of verticality, of constant dripping water. Now, I want to shift gears completely.
Big shift.
We're getting back in our virtual car. We're driving east, climbing up and over the Cascade Pass. We hit the summit, and we start dropping down into the rain shadow.
And the changes. It's just so dramatic. You can watch it happen out the window. You see the Douglas firs and western hemlocks thin out. Then the ponderosa pines appear, and then they start to thin out. And then suddenly the trees are just gone. The moss is gone. The lush green is gone.
And we find ourselves in the shrub steppe. central and eastern Oregon, and
It
Washington.
looks like a different planet.
Mm-hmm.
You have rolling grasslands, lots of sagebrush, maybe some western juniper dotting the landscape. And the ground is this fine, powdery, volcanic sand, ash, and clays. It's arid. It's blisteringly hot in the summer and freezing in the winter.
And this is where the green blur we talked about at the beginning becomes the brown blur.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people, and I'm definitely including myself in this before reading this material, would look at the ground between the sagebrush plants and just see dirt, bare soil.
It really does look like bare soil from a distance, but if you stop the car again, get out, and crouch down, I mean really get on your hands and knees, you realize it's not just dirt, it's a textured, lumpy, often dark-colored carpet. This is the biotic soil crust.
I love that term, biotic soil crust. It sounds like a geological layer, like a type of rock, but it's alive.
It is the living skin of the desert. It's an incredibly complex community of lichens, bryophytes, which are mosses, algae, and bacteria living on and in the top few millimeters of the soil.
So in the rainforest, the dominant lichen, the Lobaria, is hanging 200 feet up in the air. Here, it's hugging the ground for dear life. What is it doing down there?
It's playing the role of ecosystem engineer. In these arid environments, the biggest enemy is erosion. You have these high, constant winds. You have intense, sudden thunderstorms in the summer. Without something to hold it all together, that fine volcanic soil would just blow away or wash away into the gullies.
So the crust is the glue.
It is literally the glue. The cyanobacteria and the fungal filaments weave through the soil particles, binding them together into a coherent layer. It creates a physical barrier that stops the wind and the water from carrying the soil away.
It stops the desert from becoming a dust bowl.
Precisely. And it does more than just that. It acts as a gatekeeper. Are you familiar with cheatgrass?
Oh, yeah. The invasive grass that just takes over everything, dries out early in the summer, and then fuels all those massive wildfires.
That's the one. Cheatgrass is an absolute nightmare for the ecosystems of the interior West. But multiple studies have shown that an intact, healthy biological crust makes it very, very hard for cheatgrass seeds to germinate.
How does it do that?
The crust occupies the space. It creates a physical shield. It also changes the soil chemistry and water availability right at the surface in ways that favor native plants over the invasive grass. It keeps the invaders out.
So in the rainforest, the lichen fertilizes the trees. In the desert, the lichen holds the ground in place and fights off invasive species.
Two completely different functions, but both are absolutely critical to the health of their respective ecosystems.
Now, in the rainforest, we focused on one main species, the giant Lobaria. But down here in the dirt, the diversity is just shocking. The outline mentions a specific study from the Prineville district in Oregon.
Yes, this was a fascinating piece of research by Jesse Miller and his colleagues. They went out and surveyed random plots in the high desert, really getting down and looking closely at these crusts. And in this one small area, they found 99 distinct lichen taxa.
99 species just living in the dirt.
Just in the crust. And the variety is amazing. Some of them are cryptic. They just look like little black dots. But some are unbelievably beautiful, like a species called Acrospora schleicheri.
That's the bright yellow one.
Yes, it's a brilliant neon yellow crust. It almost looks like someone took a yellow highlighter and colored the soil. It's one of the few you can actually spot from a standing position. And what's really cool is that it tells a story about time.
How so?
Well, Acrospora is what we call a late successional species. It's often found growing on another lichen, a gray one called Diploschistes, which in turn is often found growing on a third, more shrubby lichen called Cladonia.
It's a lichen nesting doll, one lichen growing on top of another.
It's a succession. It implies that that patch of soil has been stable and undisturbed for a very long time, long enough for one lichen to grow and establish and then be colonized by another and then another. We are talking about decades, maybe even centuries of stability to create that little yellow patch.
That just blows my mind. You look at the dirt and you think it's just dirt.
Yeah.
It's static. But it's an ancient slow-motion city.
It is. And like any city, it has its very rare inhabitants. The study found some species that are incredibly scarce. The one that really stood out to me from the notes was Texasporium sancti jacobi.
The holy grail of the crusts.
It is. It's federally listed as a species of concern. It's incredibly rare, and its habitat quirks are, well, they're very specific.
Specific is a polite way to put it. The notes say it was found growing on old rabbit droppings.
It was. It grows on what we call organic substrates. So it was found on dead bunch grass clumps, but also, yes, on old rabbit pellets.
So to be a lichenologist in the high desert, you have to be willing to crawl around with a magnifying glass looking at old bunny poop.
That is the glamour of field biology right there. But there's a certain logic to it. This particular lichen seems to need that little concentration of organic matter to get started. But the study found another more important place it likes to hide.
Where was that?
They found it in the deep crevices between basalt outcrops, between the rocks. And this discovery connects directly to the biggest threat these crusts face.
And that is
Cows.
the cow hoof factor.
Exactly. We have to remember, these crusts are unbelievably fragile. Imagine a burnt cracker lying on the ground. If you step on it, what happens?
Crunch. It shattered.
It shatters. Now imagine a 1,500-pound cow walking across that same ground. The hooves just pulverize the crust, they completely destroy it. And once that seal is broken, the wind gets underneath it, erosion starts, and the cheatgrass moves in.
The whole system collapses.
It can, but the cows can't step into the deep, sharp crevices between the basalt rocks.
So the rocks are natural fences. They're refuges.
Exactly. The rare lichen survives in the cracks because it's the only place the hooves can't reach. It's a tiny, protected island in a sea of disturbance.
That really paints a picture of just how fragile this entire landscape is. In the rainforest, the Lobaria is way up in the canopy. It's safe from being stepped on. But here, the entire ecosystem is literally underfoot.
And the recovery time is geological. In the wet forest, things grow back relatively fast. In the high desert, a single footprint might be visible for years. A destroyed crust community might take 50 to 100 years to fully recover its function, if it ever does.
Now, we also need to talk about the cow pie factor that was mentioned in the notes, because that was actually a positive thing, wasn't it?
It was, surprisingly. The researchers specifically searched old cow pies that had weathered and integrated into the soil. As the manure decomposes, it creates this rich, organic microhabitat that holds moisture much better than the surrounding sand.
So it's a little oasis.
A tiny oasis. So in a weird twist, the cows destroy the crust with their feet, but their waste provides a little refuge for certain other types of lichens to survive the heat and drought.
Nature is messy. It's never simple.
It's incredibly messy and full of contradictions.
I want to take a step back for a second. We've been throwing around all these Latin names, Lobaria, Texasporium. We've been describing yellow crusts and green lettuce. But how do we actually know what we are looking at? If I'm a student in the Willamette Valley and I pick up a piece of crust off the ground, how do I go about identifying it?
This is where we enter the detective phase of the work. Lichen identification is notoriously difficult. You can't just look at the flower or the leaf shape like you do with a daisy.
Because the shape and color can change so much based on the environment, right?
Right.
Whether it's wet or dry, sunny or shady.
It can. And many, many different species look nearly identical to the naked eye. So lichenologists have to rely on two main tools, herbaria and chemistry.
Let's start with herbaria. It sounds like a library for plants.
It is exactly that. It's a library. But instead of books, the shelves are filled with dried, pressed, and cataloged plant and fungal specimens. A herbarium is a collection of biological history. We have lichen specimens that were collected in the Pacific Northwest going all the way back to the late 1800s.
Why is a dried piece of crust from 1890 still important today?
Because it's a time capsule. It's a physical data point. It tells us what the world looked like back then and where things lived. We can use those specimens to track the effects of climate change, for instance.
How would that work?
Well, let's say we have a specimen of a cold-loving lichen that was collected on the floor of the Willamette Valley in 1900. But today, when we go out looking for it, that species is only found at 4,000 feet elevation up in the mountains.
It proves that the valley floor has gotten too hot for it to survive there anymore.
Exactly. It maps the warming climate over a century. We can also extract DNA from these old samples to figure out evolutionary family trees and how species are related. It's an invaluable resource.
So that's the historical record. But what about the chemistry? The notes refer to it as chemical warfare for identification.
It is a bit dramatic, but it's also kind of true. Lichens produce over 700 known secondary metabolites. These are complex chemicals that are unique to them. They're not used for basic metabolism.
What are they for?
All sorts of things. Some are sunscreens to protect against UV radiation. Some are bitter-tasting compounds to make them taste bad so insects and snails don't eat them.
And scientists can use these unique chemical signatures to identify them.
Yes. If you go on a hike with a serious lichenologist, they will pull out a little field kit of dropper bottles. They will carefully scrape a tiny bit of the lichen's cortex, the outer skin, to expose the white layer of fungal threads inside, and they will apply a single drop of a chemical.
This is the spot test.
The spot test, the most common one is the K test, which uses potassium hydroxide. It's basically liquid lye, so you have to be careful. You drop it on the exposed inner part of a lichen and you watch.
And what happens?
It's instant chemistry. Depending on the acids present in that species, it might turn a brilliant blood red, or it might flash a vibrant neon yellow, or it might turn a deep rusty brown, or do nothing at all.
It's like a mood ring for science, a chemical fingerprint.
It tells you exactly which group of lichen acids is present. There's also the C test, which is just household bleach sodium hypochlorite that turns certain species bright pink or red. And there's the P test, which uses a chemical called paraphenylenediamine, which is a bit more toxic but gives you another set of reactions.
That sounds intense, a whole field of microchemistry on a rock.
It is. But my absolute favorite identification tool isn't a chemical dropper. It's a flashlight.
The UV light.
Yes. A simple UV blacklight. Some lichens produce chemicals that are fluorescent. You can be walking through a gray, drab forest or looking at a seemingly boring gray rock. You shine a UV blacklight on it at night, and suddenly a specific lichen starts to glow bright orange, or a ghostly ice blue, or a vivid yellow.
That is so cool. It's like a hidden rave happening in the microforest.
It effectively is, and sometimes that specific fluorescence is the only way to reliably distinguish one species from another in the field. It just reminds you that there's this whole layer of complexity, a whole world of chemical signals that our eyes just aren't built to see.
I love that. It really reinforces this whole idea that we are just scratching the surface.
Always. There's always more to see if you have the right tools.
Okay, speaking of scratching the surface, or maybe I should say digging beneath it, we need to talk about the final piece of our Pacific Northwest puzzle. We've talked about the partnership between fungus and algae, that's lichen. But there is another fungal partnership that is critical to the Northwest, and this one is, it's much more appetizing.
We are moving from the branch and the crust to the underground. We are talking about truffles.
Yes. Now, help me make the connection here for our listeners. Lichen is fungus plus algae. What is a truffle?
A truffle is the fruit of a fungus. Just the fruit, like an apple on a tree. But this particular fungus doesn't partner with algae. It partners with tree roots. It's what we call a mycorrhizal relationship.
Mycorrhizal. Okay, break that word down for me.
Myco means fungus, and rhizal means root. So, fungus root.
So how does this fungus root partnership work?
The main body of the fungus grows entirely underground. It consists of miles and miles of these incredibly fine threads called mycelium. These threads wrap around and sometimes penetrate the fine root tips of trees, especially Douglas firs in our region.
And what does the fungus do for the tree?
It acts as a massive extension of the tree's own root system. These fungal threads are much, much thinner than even the tiniest tree roots, so they are way more efficient at scavenging for water and for crucial minerals like phosphorus from the soil.
So the fungus gives the tree water and hard-to-get minerals. What does the tree give back to the fungus?
Sugar, the same thing the alga gives the lichen. The tree is up in the sunlight, photosynthesizing, making carbohydrates. It then sends a portion of those sugars down through its roots to feed its fungal partner living down there in the dark soil.
Another symbiotic trait. So where does the truffle itself come in?
The truffle is the reproductive part of that underground fungus. It's the apple on the mycelial tree. It forms underground, usually in the top few inches of soil, right where all the tree roots and fungal activity is happening.
Now, when most people hear the word truffle, they think of France. They think of Italy. They think of specially trained pigs. But the Pacific Northwest is actually a global hotspot for native truffles.
It is. We have hundreds of native species, most of which aren't edible. But for the culinary world, we really focus on what are called the Oregon Four.
Let's run through the menu. If I'm a foodie in Oregon or Washington, what am I looking for?
Okay, first up you have the Oregon winter white truffle. Its scientific name is Tuber oregonens. It's usually pretty small, maybe marble to golf ball sized.
The flavor profile on that one.
It's very complex. The descriptions usually involve garlic, spices, and a kind of cheesy, savory note. But here is the trick with the winter white, and it's an important one. It often doesn't have much of a smell when you first pull it out of the ground. The aroma develops after it's been harvested as it continues to ripen for a few days.
That's interesting. Okay, what's next on the list?
Next is the Oregon spring white truffle, Tuber gibosum. It looks and tastes very similar to the winter white, but it fruits later in the year, usually from January through June. So between the two of them, you have a white truffle season that can last for almost half the year.
Then we get to the dark side.
Then we get to the Oregon black truffle, Leucangium carthusianum, and this one is visually very striking. It's coal black on the outside with a bumpy, warty texture, and when you cut it open, the inside looks like gray pockets separated by intricate white veins. It looks like a piece of marble.
And the smell. The notes for this one say pineapple.
Yes, it is distinctly fruity. When it's young and fresh, it smells of pineapple, sometimes floral notes, maybe a bit of mango. It's very sweet smelling. As it gets older and overripe, that smell can become more pungent and musky, but that initial fruity note is what makes it so famous.
And finally, there's a brown one.
The Oregon brown truffle, Calapuya burnea, it's a kind of orangish brown, also warty, and has a very strong garlicky odor. And what's interesting is it was only scientifically described and given its own genus, Calapuya, relatively recently, which just shows how much we are still learning about the fungi right under our feet.
Now, there is a big controversy in the Pacific Northwest truffle world that we need to address. It's a battle of harvesting methods. It's dogs versus rakes.
This is a huge, huge issue, both for the conservation of the truffles and for the quality of the product that ends up in restaurants. To understand it, you have to go back to why a truffle smells in the first place.
Right. Why does a fungus that lives its whole life underground need to smell so strongly of garlic or pineapple?
Because it wants to be eaten.
It wants to be eaten.
Think about a mushroom that grows above ground. It has a cap and gills. The wind blows and the spores get carried away to find a new home. Simple. But a truffle is trapped underground. The wind can't reach it. So it evolved a different strategy.
It calls for help.
It calls for help. It evolved to emit a strong, pungent odor to attract animals in our forests. That's flying squirrels, voles, bears, and, of course, us.
So the smell is a dinner bell.
Exactly. The animal is attracted by the smell. It digs up the truffle, eats it, runs a mile away, and then, well, it poops out the spores in a new location. That's how the fungus spreads and reproduces. But here is the absolute key. The truffle only produces that strong, attractive smell when its spores are mature and ready to be spread.
So an unripe truffle has no smell.
Correct. It has no smell and therefore no culinary value. It tastes like a piece of raw potato. It's worthless.
So if I go out into the woods with a 4-pronged garden rake and just start tearing up the top layer of soil,
you are harvesting blindly. You are raking up everything in your path, the few ripe truffles, but also all of the unripe ones. You are effectively killing the next generation of truffles before they're ready. And even worse, you are destroying the habitat. You are ripping up the delicate fungal mats, the mycelium that sustain that truffle patch year after year.
So raking is bad for the fungus, it's bad for the partner tree, and it gives you a mostly bad, unripe product.
Enter the dog.
The hero of our story.
The dog is the gold standard. A trained truffle dog doesn't care about unripe truffles. It ignores them completely because they don't have that smell. It only hones in on the specific volatile organic compounds released by a perfectly ripe truffle.
So the dog leads you to the exact spot of a single, ready-to-harvest truffle.
Exactly. You dig a tiny, careful hole, you pop out the one ripe truffle, and you cover the hole back up. The mycelium stays intact. The unripe truffles nearby are left in the ground to mature for next week's hunt. It is sustainable, it's ecologically sound, and it guarantees that every single truffle in your basket is actually aromatic and delicious.
It connects everything back to the biology. We are essentially just eavesdropping on a chemical conversation between a fungus and a flying squirrel.
We are, and we're taking the best parts of that conversation to put on our pasta.
So let's zoom out. We've covered the canopy with the lettuce lichen. We've covered the desert floor with the biotic crust. We've covered the underground world with the truffles. But we need to talk about the future. What is the big picture for conservation here? What connects all these threads?
I think the common thread across all of these different environments is stability. These are organisms and systems that operate on a much, much slower timescale than we do. They need consistency.
Let's look at the wet side first. The threat there is primarily about forest management, isn't it?
Right. Lobaria oregana grows very slowly. It needs the complex structure, the stable microclimate of an old-growth forest. When we clear-cut a forest and replant it as a dense monoculture of young Douglas firs, we are creating what some scientists call a lichen desert.
Because the trees are harvested every 40 or 50 years, long before the lichen can really establish itself.
Exactly. If you're on that short rotation, the Lobaria never gets a chance to colonize and grow to that massive biomass we talked about. It never becomes the nitrogen factory. So the new forest is chemically poorer, less resilient, and less diverse than the old one it replaced.
And on the dry side, the threat seems even more immediate.
It is because the organisms are so physically fragile.
Hmm.
Trampling by livestock is a major, major issue. But beyond that, it's development in agriculture.
The notes mention that the rare soil crust lichens seem to really love fine, silty soils.
They do. Those soils hold moisture better than sand. But what else loves fine, silty soils?
Farming.
Humans. That's the best soil for growing potatoes, onions, alfalfa, and wheat. It's also the easiest, flattest ground on which to build new housing developments. The Columbia Valley, the Treasure Valley in Idaho and Oregon. These are some of the fastest growing agricultural and residential hubs in the country.
So we are literally paving over and plowing under these incredibly diverse ancient habitats that we barely even understand.
That's the scariest part. In that one Oregon steppe study we discussed, they found 7 lichen taxa that were new records for the state of Oregon, and some that were arguably new to North America entirely. We are losing species before we even have a chance to give them names.
And with them, we lose all the ecosystem services they provide for free.
We lose the nitrogen fixation. We lose the soil stabilization. When you destroy the biotic crust over large areas, you get more dust storms. You get more erosion. You get more cheatgrass, which means more wildfires. You lose the ability of the land to hold itself together and to heal itself.
It really makes you realize that conservation isn't just about saving the spotted owl or the cute grizzly bear cubs.
No. And those charismatic animals are incredibly important, don't get me wrong, but they are the penthouse residents of the ecosystem. The lichens, the crusts, the truffles, the mycelial networks, they are the foundation, the plumbing, and the wiring of the entire building. If we only focus on conserving what we can easily see, the big and the furry, we might lose the very things that keep the soil in place and the trees fed.
It's the invisible world that supports the visible one.
That is the perfect way to summarize it. It's the biological dark matter of the ecosystem.
So what is the final takeaway for our listener today? When they turn off this deep dive and they step outside, what should they do differently?
I want them to look closer. I want them to fight that cognitive habit of the blur. Don't just look at the tree, look at the branch. Don't just look at the desert, look at the dirt.
Break the green blur. Break the brown blur.
Break the blur. Realize that that splash of orange color on a rock is a civilization that might be older than you are. Realize that the lumpy dirt between 2 sagebrush plants is alive and is holding the whole landscape together. These things are fighting for territory, they are trading sugar for shelter, they are fixing nitrogen from the air, and they are holding our world together.
And I'll leave you with this final thought. We talked a lot about time today. A Lobaria lichen grows just a tiny fraction of its size each year. A soil crust might take 50 or 100 years to recover from a single boot print. When we walk through these landscapes, we are walking on biology, yes, but we are also walking on history.
We are walking on deep time.
So tread lightly. And maybe, just maybe, get down on your hands and knees and take a really close look. You might find a whole new world down there.
Just, watch out for the rabbit poop.
Words to live by. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you on the next one.